The most amazing stories aren't always found in big, fancy history books. Sometimes they're hidden away in dusty old archives, just waiting for someone to connect the dots. Today, we're going to piece together the life of a woman who tried her best to disappear, using the very breadcrumbs she left behind. Our whole investigation starts right here, with this one clue from 1880. It's a newspaper ad. A man, George Baker, is publicly shaming his wife, Harriet. He says he won't pay her debts because she left her home without my consent. I mean, can you imagine? With one short, nasty notice, he turned their private drama into a massive public scandal.
But here's the thing. That explosive notice, it wasn't the end for Harriet, not by a long shot. It was really just one moment in a life full of reinvention. So that leaves us with the big question. Who really was Harriet Head?
To figure out the woman behind that newspaper ad, we've got to go all the way back to the beginning, back to a time when she made a solo trip from Victorian England all the way to the rugged Australian frontier.
Okay, I want you to just picture this for a second. It's 1867, Harriet is only 19 years old, and she gets on a ship and sails by herself from England to Western Australia. We're talking a 3-month voyage to what was basically the other side of the known world. The sheer guts that must have taken, it's just mind-boggling.
And here we have it, the actual proof that she made it. This is a government notice from January 1868. It says the ship Tartar has arrived. And look, it lists 25 single women available for service. And right there among them was Harriet, stepping off that boat into a whole new world. So Harriet gets to this new colony, and she wastes no time trying to build a life for herself. But, as we're about to find out, that new life involved marrying a man who had a pretty big secret of his own. Just 1 year after she arrives, she marries George Baker. This handwritten record here makes it all look pretty standard, He's a laborer, about 15 years older than her. On the surface, everything seems totally normal. But this is where things get interesting, and our little investigation really kicks off. Because that simple description, laborer, doesn't even begin to tell the real story. So, who was this guy she married? Well, when historians started digging into the records, a totally different story popped up. His father's name? It matched a convict's. Turns out, George Baker himself was an ex-soldier who'd been court-martialed for desertion. He'd been transported, which is a nice way of saying he was shipped to Australia as a criminal, and was officially listed as convict number 1462. And the paper trail is undeniable. I mean, look at this. These are actual pages from the Police Gazette, a warrant for his arrest for deserting service in 1880, and then another entry showing he was caught before the charge was dropped. The secret was out. Harriet had married a convict. So let's get this straight. Harriet is married to an ex-convict, raising 5 kids on the frontier. And then, everything changes. She makes a desperate move, a decision that becomes the point of no return. And that brings us right back to this explosive newspaper ad. Now that we know who he was and what their life was probably like, this public notice feels even heavier. This wasn't just a breakup. This was him declaring war on her in public. But George didn't stop there. Just a month later, he had this warrant issued for Harriet's arrest. The document even gives her physical description. And the charge, it's just shocking. Deserting her husband and 4 children. And just like that, Harriet was officially a fugitive from the law. We have to really understand how huge this was. In the 1880s, for a woman to just up and leave her husband and kids, it was basically unthinkable. It meant complete social ruin. So for her to do it, it tells you she must have been incredibly desperate, incredibly determined, or more likely, a whole lot of both. So what does a fugitive mother do? Well, she disappears. This next chapter of Harriet's life is all about living in the shadows with a new man and a totally new identity. Harriet starts over with another man, Michael Brady, and they go on to have 3 more kids. But they were clearly terrified of being found. Just look at the birth certificates for their children. Harriet is using these bizarre fake names like Vandersaluch and Vandersawhick to cover her tracks. They were literally hiding in plain sight. But it's not like she ran off into a fairy tale. Her new partner, Michael Brady, was, you guessed it, another ex-convict and a career criminal. This newspaper clipping from 1897 doesn't pull any punches, calling him a brute while reporting on what was his 52nd conviction. 52nd?
Okay, so after years of living on the run with some pretty difficult men, Harriet's story takes yet another turn. But this time, it's a turn towards stability, and for the very first time, a life she could call her own.
Get this. In 1903, at 55 years old, she gets married again. Her new husband is a guy named William O. Burns, who was 14 years younger than her, which was so unusual for that time. And check out the name she used on the marriage certificate, Harriet Vandersluck. She was still carrying that secret past with her. And this marriage finally brought her something she'd never had before: property. When her husband died, he left everything to her. This rate book from 1915 lists her as a property owner. And what's so cool is on the right, that's the house, still standing today at 25 Peckenham Street, a real tangible piece of her story. So, after finally finding some stability, Harriet enters the last phase of her life. She's not a fugitive anymore. She's not a convict's wife. She's now the matriarch, the head of a whole new family. Harriet lived to be 87 years old. An incredible life. She passed away in 1935, and this is her death notice. It calls her the dearly beloved mother of Augustus, Mary, and Clara, her 3 children with Michael Brady. But notice what's missing. There's no mention, not a single word about the 5 children she left behind with George Baker. Let's just take a second to recap the sheer scale of her life's journey. 1869, she marries a convict. Around 1880, she leaves him for another one. In 1903, she marries a younger guy and finally gets some independence. And then, and this is just unbelievable, in 1918, at 70 years old, she gets married for a 4th and final time. What a life. So, what do you make of someone like Harriet Head? Is she a deserter who abandoned her kids? A survivor who clawed her way through unbelievable hardship? A matriarch who built a brand new life from nothing? So, I'll leave you with this. How should we remember a woman who simply refused to play by the rules?